Ferrari promised to fight for everything with the SF-25, but after 3 races there are already doubts. What's going wrong at Maranello? Today we're going to analyze whether this car has the hidden pace to surprise us, or if the red dream already needs urgent surgery. Do you think Ferrari can turn things around this season, or is it too late? Let me know in the comments. I want to read your thoughts before revealing key data. Despite the potential shown in the simulations and the optimism prevailing during the preseason, the reality on the track has been much more complex for Ferrari. The SF-25 has exposed a series of technical problems that are directly affecting its performance and consistency. The disappointing results in Australia and the chaos in China, where both cars were disqualified, are not simple accidents. They are clear symptoms of a car that, for the moment, is not living up to its promise. One of the most critical failures has to do with the rear suspension and the car's ride height management. Ferrari opted to maintain its pull rod configuration on the rear axle, but implemented a series of modifications to the suspension arms. These alterations, far from improving stability, have generated behavior that has become problematic. The car tends to dive excessively at the rear, especially under aerodynamic load or during braking. This causes premature and excessive wear of the floor, a component that must maintain a minimum height from the asphalt according to FIA regulations. This rear dive was especially evident at the Chinese Grand Prix, where Lewis Hamilton's car was disqualified after the race due to not meeting the regulatory minimum height. The wear on the skid plate, that small titanium piece on the underbody of the car designed to protect the underbody and measure ground clearance, was so severe that it exposed the SF-25's main Achilles heel. It cannot maintain its height stably without compromising its aerodynamic performance. The dilemma for the engineers is complex. If they raise the car's ride height to prevent bottom wear, they lose downforce. If they stiffen the suspension to prevent the car from diving, they compromise cornering, especially in slow corners where traction and stability are key. This forces Ferrari to constantly hover in a compromised midpoint that doesn't allow the car to perform at its full potential in any area. On the other hand, the front suspension, which adopts a pull rod layout for the first time, has also been a cause for concern. Although this decision sought aerodynamic benefits and better integration with the front airflow, the reality is that Ferrari is in the learning phase with this design. They have not yet managed to find a setup that allows the car to behave predictably on different circuits and conditions. Charles Leclerc has been very clear on this point. The car reacts unexpectedly, which has seriously affected his confidence since preseason testing in Bahrain. In addition to the structural issues, there are signs that certain components of the car are generating inconsistent behavior. Lewis Hamilton recently stated that his car had been experiencing a specific problem since the first race. Although the team has already identified the source, they are unsure of the exact reason. This lack of technical clarity in an environment as competitive as Formula One is worrying. Every diagnostic error not only results in lost time, but also in points that could make the difference at the end of the year. The truth is that the SF-25 in its current state is trapped in a vicious cycle. Correcting one weakness exacerbates another. Any modification that improves one critical area of performance ends up weakening another, making finding a definitive solution a daunting task. And in modern Formula One, where every millisecond counts, this type of imbalance is lethal. Right now, Ferrari isn't facing a single problem, but rather a set of interconnected challenges that are drastically limiting the car's performance. From an overly soft rear suspension to a front suspension they haven't yet mastered, to a bottom end that wears faster than acceptable, and an overall balance that just isn't quite right. All this while teams like McLaren, Red Bull, and Mercedes continue to score points and fine-tune their machines race after race. Later, we'll see what Ferrari is doing to address these issues, what its update plan is, and whether those improvements could arrive in time to save its season. Amid the technical turbulence that has marked Ferrari's season opener, the central question is not just what's going wrong, but whether viable solutions are on the horizon. And more importantly, whether they will arrive in time. Because in modern Formula One, the difference between redirecting a season or falling into irrelevance is measured in weeks, not months. Out of Maranello, the signals have been mixed. Initially, the development plan for the SF-25 contemplated introducing a series of major updates leading up to the Bahrain Grand Prix. The most notable, a new flat floor designed to combat excessive wear caused by rear axle sag. However, following the problems seen in Australia and especially in China, where a disqualification for technical non-compliance set off alarm bells, conflicting reports began to circulate. Some sources within the paddock indicated that Ferrari would be forced to bring forward this package of improvements to the Japanese Grand Prix. The idea would be simple: The sooner the car's structural problem is resolved, the fewer points will be lost in the process. Other sources, however, maintained that the team preferred not to rush, fearing that a premature implementation without sufficient validation would lead to even more complications. Amid this internal debate, the technical department led by Leclerc, recently appointed technical director, has had to take on a decisive role. With significant experience at Mercedes, Sarah was brought to Ferrari precisely to lead these types of complex technical transitions, and this is undoubtedly his first major test. The balance between maintaining the original plan and reacting to the urgency of the moment will determine not only the immediate future of the SF-25, but also Sarah's own reputation within the team. One of the main points of debate revolves around the introduction of the new flat floor. This update is no small feat. It not only seeks to reduce wear on the skid and stabilize the car's height, but is also designed to recover some of the downforce lost with the emergency solutions implemented so far. The risk, of course, is high. If the new floor doesn't interact properly with the car's overall aerodynamic flow, it can further compromise balance and cornering stability, two areas where the SF-25 is already struggling. Added to this is the fact that Ferrari has opted for a design philosophy that prioritizes development throughout the season. In other words, the car was conceived with the idea of constantly evolving race after race. This sounds good in theory, but it means that the base car, the one we're seeing on track in these early days, is not yet a refined version. In fact, it could be said that it's just a first draft that needs time and testing to become a true title contender. The problem is that Formula One isn't waiting. While Ferrari calibrates, interprets, and fine-tunes its car, McLaren continues to score points, Red Bull remains competitive, and Mercedes appears to be making up ground. In this context, every lost weekend becomes another mountain to climb mid-season. Another element complicates the situation: the lack of correlation between simulator data and on-track results. In other words, the car shows great promise in controlled environments, but is failing to replicate that performance in real-life conditions. This further complicates any attempt to introduce updates, because if the baseline data isn't accurate, new parts might not solve anything or worsen existing problems. That said, there are reasons to believe that solutions could start working soon. Lewis Hamilton has publicly stated that the team has identified a specific problem with his car and is working to address it with new parts that should arrive in the upcoming races. Although the component hasn't been specified, his optimism suggests that Ferrari may be beginning to understand the true source of its problems. However, the big question remains: will the solutions arrive in time to keep championship aspirations alive? Because while the SF-25 has potential, that potential without execution becomes an empty promise. And in a season that's shaping up to be a very tight race between the top 4 teams, any timing error could cost them the championship. In the next section, we'll explore whether, despite all these setbacks, the SF-25 can become a competitive force. We'll see what technical advantages the car has that haven't yet been exploited, and whether Ferrari can go from chasing its rivals to putting pressure on them. Despite the difficult start to the season and the many technical issues that have hampered the SF-25 in its first outings, all is not lost for Ferrari. Unlike previous years, where the car reached its development ceiling very early, leaving little room for reaction, the design approach for 2025 deliberately opted for a platform with high evolution potential. And that is precisely what could make the difference in the medium term. The SF-25 was conceived not as a finished solution, but as a working base with room to grow. Leclerc, the team's new technical director, has been clear in his approach. The previous car, the SF-24, reached a point where extracting more performance was extremely difficult. Therefore, the commitment for 2025 was radical, breaking with the past and building a machine that, although complex at first, can become a winning weapon throughout the championship. From the very beginning, concepts were integrated that allow for a large number of structural adjustments without the need to completely redesign the chassis. This means Ferrari has the capacity to introduce profound changes without compromising the car's homologation. Elements such as the floor, the wings, and especially the suspension were conceived with flexibility in mind. The new floor is a good example. This part not only aims to solve the problem of illegal wear and height management, but has also been developed to recover downforce in areas where the SF-25 currently struggles. In theory, if the part is integrated correctly, it will allow the car to return to a more competitive height without compromising regulatory reliability. This, in turn, would improve mid- and high-level cornering, one of the major weaknesses detected in the first 3 races. But there's more. During the Shanghai sprint race, when conditions were somewhat different and the cars benefited from a cooler track and lower fuel consumption, the SF-25 showed for the first time some of its promise in the simulators. Lewis Hamilton achieved a solid performance that suggested that, when the car is in an optimal operating window, the potential is there. All that's needed is consistency and the ability to replicate that performance under standard race conditions. Another positive point is the mechanical balance that Ferrari has worked on since pre-season. Significant effort has been made to improve the transition between front and rear grip during acceleration phases, especially in slow corners. Although this work has not yet translated into consistent lap times, it shows that the team is not lost. They know where the problems lie and have begun to develop specific solutions for each. Hamilton's addition to the team is also a key factor. His experience with demanding cars, his ability to detect handling issues, and his technical communication skills can make a significant difference in the car's development. They have already identified inconsistencies in their unit and have actively collaborated with the engineers to understand the root of the problem. If Ferrari can resolve these differences between the two cars and establish a solid base setup, a recovery will be much more viable. Furthermore, we must not forget that the 2025 season is long and there are still many races to run. Teams like Mercedes have demonstrated in the recent past that a complicated situation can be turned around if the technical problem is well understood and solutions are implemented quickly and precisely. Ferrari, with its infrastructure, budget, and human talent, has all the necessary tools to do the same. In short, yes, there is light at the end of the tunnel. The SF-25 is a problematic car, but it is also a car with untapped potential. If the upcoming updates work as expected and the team manages to stabilize the car's behavior, the second half of the season could offer a very different outlook. Ferrari doesn't need to reinvent itself, it just needs to unlock the performance it already has on the table. The challenge now is clear: turn that theoretical potential into real results. And do it quickly. Because while it's not too late to fight, every race without a clear improvement on track brings Ferrari one step closer to another season of unfulfilled promises. In the next section, we'll review how all this translates into the long-term perspective, and what's really at stake if Ferrari fails to turn things around in the upcoming races. After thoroughly analyzing the current situation of the Ferrari SF-25, what is clear is that the Scuderia is at a turning point. The 2025 season has not started as expected. Despite finishing last year as runner-up in the World Championship and opting for a completely new platform, the car is still not performing at the level it needs to fight for the championship. Ferrari has designed a car with an ambitious philosophy. It's not just about competing from the first race, but also about having ample development time to allow them to grow throughout the calendar. But that approach comes with risks. Currently, the SF-25 is compromised by structural issues, particularly related to the rear suspension, height management, and unpredictable on-track behavior. Problems that have already had concrete consequences, such as disqualification in China and an alarming performance gap with McLaren and Red Bull. The margin for error narrows with each passing race. The upgrade plan, especially the introduction of the new floor, will be decisive. If this solution works as expected, it could completely change Ferrari's outlook and reopen the fight for the top spots. If not, we could be facing a repeat of the pattern that has hampered the team in recent years: technical promises that never translate into points. What's at stake is not just a season. Lewis Hamilton's arrival marks a new era, a new cycle, with the added pressure of having one of the most successful drivers in history on the team. Expectations are high both inside and outside the team, and that places a much higher level of demand than usual. Frederic Vasseur, Loic Serra, the engineers, the mechanics, the drivers, everyone is under scrutiny. Because Ferrari can't afford another transitional season, not when the title seemed so close just a few months ago. Still, all is not lost. The technical structure of the SF-25, its hidden potential, the team's resources, and the still long schedule suggest a recovery if the development plan is executed precisely. The key will be to avoid panic, work intelligently, and achieve a real correlation between simulator data and on-track performance. Ultimately, to find the competitive version of the car that showed so much promise before the season even began. If Ferrari manages to align all these pieces, it can return to the fight. It can give its drivers a car worthy of their talents. It can rekindle the hope of millions of fans still waiting for the Scuderia's return to the pinnacle of world motorsport. And if that change begins to be seen in the upcoming races, we will be witnessing one of the most exciting turns of the season. Because when Ferrari gets it right, it gets it right. The question is, will we see that rebirth this year, or will we have to wait until 2026? Now it's your turn. Do you think Ferrari will be able to solve its problems and return to the fight for victories? Or are we facing another season of frustration and mid-season adjustments? Share your thoughts in the comments, subscribe if you haven't already, and hit the bell so you don't miss the next analysis.